I needed a new bookcase, so I'm going to show you how I built my favorite bookcase, which is the IKEA Hemnes bookcase. But not only that, I'm going to be installing two different lighting setups, one focused around displaying books and the other one focused around displaying figures. And at the end, I'll give you 10 tips of what you can do after you finish building your own bookcase to take it to the next level. And before I get started, why the IKEA Hemnes over the IKEA Billy? And while it's true that the Billy bookcase is much cheaper, and it's a great case for starting off, I prefer the Hemnes bookcase because of its stylish frame, it's much easier to install and hide lighting, and the bookcase and shelves are made out of wood instead of particle board. And because of this, the shelves don't sag as easily as the particle board Billy bookcase shelves. For example, I throw my whole Berserk collection on the shelf, and I don't even notice a sag. And my last call out before we start this build is, this is going to be a two-part series where this video covers building the ultimate bookcase, and the follow-up video will show you how I built matching display cases to go with it. So let's jump into how to build this. Starting off, there are two boxes, but the one you need to worry about is the large one, especially if you're driving at home. Therefore, you'll need a vehicle that has at least 78.5 inches by 17 inches by 2.5 inches. Now, opening the boxes, this is what you get. Two softwood side frames, some frame pieces, hardware, two back panels, and shelves. Note the shelves are a bit sturdier than the actual frame, but they also feel heavier than the actual frame. Also, my back panels came damaged, but I'll fix those up later with some paint. And before I forget, it also comes with the IKEA instruction manual. Note, it helps to build this with a friend and on some kind of rug or carpet to prevent it from scratching up the bookcase. So, step 1. I laid out the two large side frame pieces out like this, making sure that the large wood cutout is on the outside. Then taking 8 of the long screw connectors, I screwed them into the small holes in the 4 corners of each frame. This is how it looked when done. I'll highlight the holes I used in green and use red for the holes that I did not touch. For step 2, I took these 2 wooden boards and using 6 wooden dowel pins, I inserted them in the outlined holes. Note, the diagram has them facing in the opposite direction. I'm just laying them in the same direction for simplicity's sake. And this is how it looks when all done. Now going back to the frame, to the left of the center beam, there's a hole to slot the wooden support piece into. Once in, I grabbed 2 of the large bolts and screwed them into the wooden support pieces with an Allen key. Now going to the bottom of the frame, I grabbed 2 of the remaining small pieces of wood, and with a foot peg opening facing up, I placed the boards on the outside legs of the frame. Then I grabbed 4 large bolts and screwed the leg supports into the leg. And this is how it looked when done. Now once the leg supports are in, I put the 4 foot pegs in by just screwing them into the bottom of the legs. For step 6, taking the large narrow board, I stuck a wooden dowel pin in the hole that doesn't line up with the large lock hole on the side, like this. Then I stick it into the frame, like this, making sure that the lock holes are facing toward me. Then I do the same for the other end of the frame. Now taking the small narrow board, I repeat the same process as the 2 previous boards, noting that the holes switch sides in these boards. From here, taking 4 connector locks, I slide them into the fitted lock holes on the boards that I just put in, and with a screwdriver, I turn them to lock them. Now moving back to the center, I screw 4 long screw connectors into the wooden support pieces on both frames, like so. Then grabbing the shortest shelf, taking note which side where the long edge is furthest from the lock hole, I slid the shelf into the screw connectors where the edge I pointed out is closest to me, and the lock holes are facing towards the legs. Then using 2 connector locks, I lock this shelf into the side frame. Next, taking 4 wooden dowel pins, I put them in the outline holes in the 4 corner boards. Then I pick up the other side frame, which I haven't been working on, flip it, and connect it to the side frame that I have been working on. Then taking 6 connector locks, I lock that side frame in. And once the frame is all secure, I roll it down onto its front. Easy to tell the front from the back, since the back has a bezel where I'll eventually put the back panels. After propping up the top of the frame with some books or boxes, I took 2 more wooden dowel pins and popped them into the 2 side holes. And picking up the top board, which is basically the largest of the shelves, I popped the top into the wooden dowel pins I just put into the top of the bookcase frame, taking note that I wanted the side with a central hole at the top. Once connected, I took 7 bolts and screwed them in. Now I did steps 16, 17, 18, and 19 all together. The instructions tell you to flip the bookcase back onto its side, but I didn't. I found that it's really easy to install the back panels while it's laid flat. And to do this, I took the small back panel and placed it at the top of the bookcase, making sure to slot it into the grooves that were cut out in the bookcase frame. And then I did the same with the larger back panel on the bottom being where the legs are. Then taking 3 screws and brackets, and in the middle, between the top and the bottom back panel, I screwed the brackets in to lock the back panels into the frame. Once done, I did the same for the top and bottom, but this time there were screw holes for me to use. Now that the back panels are screwed into place, I, for the first time, flipped the bookcase up on its legs. Now I'm going to skip step 23, where you fasten the bookcase into the wall. For me, I like to finish the build first, which involves installing the lighting, and then move it into place before bolting it into the wall. That said, I highly recommend bolting a bookcase to the wall, unless you want to be isekai'd like Ascendants of a Bookworm, which you don't. From this point, I get to install the shelves. Taking 4 shelf pegs, I stick them into the bottom slots of the bookcase, making sure that the long end goes in first. And taking the shelves that has the corners cut out, I popped it into the bottom. Now, all that's left is to install the rest of the shelf pegs and place the shelves. Note, the long pegs are used in the back, and the L-shaped pegs are placed in the front. After installing the rest of the shelves, I'm done with building the bookcase. This by far is my favorite bookcase from IKEA, and I noticed with this one there's some subtle differences than my other Hemnes bookcases, mainly around how the center shelf is locked into the side frame. But yeah, other than that, it's time to install the lighting. The first lighting I'm going to set up is going to be the long LED strip. I think all Hemnes bookcases should have this lighting installed. And here I went with the Govee 16.4 foot white LED strip lights. You can also go with the RGB version of these. They radiate a soft blue hue instead of a true white, but they also look really good too. My other Hemnes bookcases currently have the RGB lights installed. But yeah, to start installing these lights, I need to take out all the shelves, including the bottom shelf. Now, unwinding the LED strip, I start up the right side and slide the LED strip behind the center shelf, which cannot be taken out. There's a small 3 to 4 millimeter gap between the center shelf and the side frame, which can fit the LED strip. Anyway, I pulled up the LED strip up and through and slid it down the other side, all the while taking note not to twist the LED strip in the direction that I didn't want it to be. Now going back to the bottom right again, I pulled off the tape strip and began taping the LED against the inner wall, making sure that I'm close against the front frame. I worked my way up the side, getting a little creative around the center shelf. Note, the tape adhesive is not that strong, so you can always pull off the LED strip slowly to readjust it. Going against the top is a little tricky, since it doesn't line up perfectly with the side frame, but this is how it looks when I completed it. With the top done, I work my way down the other side, and at the bottom, I cut the access LED strip on the copper cut line, and that's it. Taking a step back, I tested out the lights, and it works just fine. As you can see, from afar, you can't see the LEDs, but if you look up close, they're very much there. Next, we have to put the shelves back in, but there is a problem. The bottom board doesn't sit flush into its spot since the LED cables are taking up a little space. So I filed down the 2 corners to make some space for the LEDs, and then I painted the parts that I filed, and put in the bottom shelf. And that's it. Throw in the rest of the shelves, and this is what I got. This looks amazing, and it is perfect for displaying books, manga, graphic novels, and you name it. Yes, it is a little dimmer in the middle of the shelf, but you can still see the book titles just fine. And the lighting adds so much atmosphere to the room. So I truly feel that this lighting should be always installed with this bookcase. But we don't have to stop there. While this lighting is good for books, what about adding some more lighting to truly show off your figures? Now to address the dim center of the previous lighting, I'm going to install my favorite way to light figures, and that's with the light bar. And if you have a thin Hemnes bookcase, you don't need this lighting because the previous lighting setup should be enough to light your figures. Anyway, I'm going to be using the Light Ever LEDs that I got off of Amazon. Basically, they're 20-inch LED strips for cabinets. And I'm going to be installing them on black aluminum V channels with a diffuser, because my bookcase is basically black and I wanted the channels to blend in. But first, I measured my shelf to determine where I should cut my V channel, which is 31 inches. Now, I'm only going to do this for the top 3 shelves. And if you have bigger figures, you can always take out 1 shelf and just use 2 shelves. Or you can set up this whole bookcase with this lighting. But I like the idea of my bottom shelves being books and the top shelves being figures. So I'm going to start off by cutting the aluminum channels. Then check out the size again, which looks pretty good. I stick the LED to the channel and then cut the diffuser to size. Note, you don't need to put on the diffuser right away. Now normally, I would run the cables down the inner side of the frame, but with the new design of the center shelf, I can't remove it, and the cables are just a bit too thick to run between the 3 to 4 millimeter gap. So I decided to drill a hole in the back panel just under the first shelf that I'm going to light. I started with a small drill bit, and then I worked my way to bigger. Also, I removed the shelf when drilling to avoid any unhappy little accidents. And if I ever want to stop using this hole, I'll just cover it over with a patch of black tape. And after putting the power cable through, I put on the diffuser. Then installed the power connectors to the LEDs. Then plugged in the power switch, and then plugged in the power to the LEDs. I tested to see if the LEDs work, and there you have it. I think we're in a good state. But this is where I take a step back and show you how I configured the 3 shelves and their connectors. Basically, all the LEDs have a male and female connector. And so this is the layout that I want. And if I was going to light up the whole shelf, this is the approach that I would do in that case. Feel free to pause the video and take a closer look. Now jumping back into it, I need a way to stick my V channel to the shelf. And that's where these Velcro strips come in. This allows me to remove the LED strips if I don't want to use them. But these Velcro strips are a bit too wide, so I'll cut them in half. I install one side of the Velcro strips to each corner of the V channel. Then I installed the other side of the Velcro strips. And after removing the tape strip, I carefully stick the V-channel to the top of the shelf. Note, the adhesive for this Velcro strip is very strong. Ripping it off to correct a mistake will not be fun. But once on, taking the LED bar off with the Velcro is not that bad. So I installed the rest of the lights and turned them on to test them out. And I'm pretty happy, except for the small gap that I see between the V-channel and the shelf, where there isn't any Velcro. My first thought was to use the felt strips that I used in the past for dust proofing. They would work great here, but I want to avoid spending money. So I just took a piece of cardboard, which I cut out, and covered it in black electrical tape, and then stuffed it in the gap. Simple problem, simple solution. Now my last problem is cable management, and that's where these clamps come in that came with the LED kit. I just stick 1 or 2 behind the frame to hold the cables. You can also use black electrical tape as another option to hide or hold the cables against the side. And with that said and done, our second lighting is complete. And this is the result. Now my iPhone camera doesn't really capture how great this looks. It looks great. All the figures have good lighting. And like I said earlier, it can be a tight fit for some figures, so removing a shelf is always an option. So now that we're all done, let's talk about tweaks and minor adjustments. And I'm gonna rapid fire these instead of going into too much detail. First up, how do I put 2 rows of books on one shelf? What I did here was take a 2x4 and cover it in black duct tape, and I stuck it vertically under the books in the back row. It works out pretty good. If you don't have enough books to fill your shelf, I highly suggest getting bookends to prevent them from falling over. Now there's a lot of options here. Etsy and other crafting sites have really cool bookends if you're looking for something unique. If you want to spice up the back panel of your bookcase with some different colors or textures, vinyl wallpaper comes in many different colors and styles, and is pretty easy to install. Though you probably need to remove your shelves to install it, and I recommend laying the bookcase on its back before installing. If you're looking to display figures, putting a mirror panel on the back adds more depth to the shelf. You may have to get a custom cut mirror to get the right size, or just stick a few small mirror tiles on the back if you're not picky. Speaking of custom cut glass, if you're displaying figures, you can always install custom cut glass shelves. If you go this route, I highly recommend getting thicker glass, so it's less likely to break under the weight. And you may need to swap out the default shelf pegs for something that supports the glass shelf. And continuing with the figure suggestions, shelf dioramas are freaking amazing. Now this is more of a suggestion if you're worried about figures falling off your shelf. You can always use instant tacky putty under your figures to really secure your figure to the shelf. I currently do this for the figures that I put on my bookshelf because I live in an earthquake zone. Just note, if you want to separate your figure from the putty, do it slowly to avoid breaking anything, because the instant putty can be pretty strong. Next topic is cleaning. Well, for figures, I use this model brush. You can also use an air can. Just make sure that you're not too close when using, and also have a vacuum close by to suck up any of the dust that's being kicked up into the air. Also, dusting and vacuuming the room regularly, and having an air purifier reduces the dust floating in the air, which helps reduce the dust collecting on the shelves. And my last tweak or suggestion is just use a smart plug to control your on-off power of your LEDs. This allows you to turn on the LEDs through a voice command or an app. And that's it. This is how I built my perfect bookcase setup. I hope it was helpful, or at least give you some ideas on how to approach doing this for a different bookcase. And remember, this video is part 1 of 2. So my next video will be focused on building side display cases to match this bookcase. So keep on the lookout for that video, and I'll link it to this video when it's out. Anyway, I appreciate you all, and thanks again for watching, and take care.